Welcome to Season 5 of the Lead with Coffee podcast, where we continue the journey into how you can change the culture in your business and your home through simple leadership practices. Grab a cup of coffee and get ready to join into today's conversation. Welcome back to Lead with Coffee. We have some exciting news today.
We do. We did something. We did a thing.
We did a thing. It took us a long time, but we officially launched an online learning academy through Lead with Coffee and our first digital course this week. It's crazy.
Yeah, it has been a process. This has literally taken us a year to do the research and the background and how best to do a digital course. And then we took some of our own advice and said, you know what, we just have to launch it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it takes a long time when you're trying to do something well. We could have easily launched a digital course in the first 30 days.
Right.
But we didn't want to just do a basic. We wanted to do, content that had value, was laid out in a way that people could really learn from and would find their way to corporate relocation. So the first course we launched is in alignment with what we do as a business. We do construction and relocation management. So we run into a lot of corporate organizations that have an HR leader, a corporate leader, or a facility manager who have been tasked with how do I relocate our organization. And our specialty typically runs between about 300 to 1,000 people. But that's for a professional service like us. What if we took that skill set to train people that maybe only had 50 or 75 or 200 that felt like they could do it in-house? And so what's that look like? And so building an educational curriculum around what we do as leaders and pulling the platform in that we love to share so much on servant leadership and how you really pour into your clients to treat your employees with respect during this type of process was really what we were honing in on.
Yeah, and I think over several years, we've had many opportunities with clients that needed help on a relocation, and the project was just too small for it to make sense for them to pay for our services along with the mover. And so what do? You say, maybe give them some tips and tricks, and you say, hey, call these 3 movers, and, either one you go with will do a good job for you. But that's kind of where we left it, and it seemed like we could do more. And
right.
I think this digital course has really offered that. And honestly, it's been 2 years since we put all of the free resources on our website for people to at least read through some of the tips and tricks we have for relocation. But we wanted to up our game. And for those of you that don't know her, Amy Porterfield is the expert in digital courses, and she has Digital Course Academy. And we've been listening to her on podcasts for a while, and it really just started to click that it makes sense that we have so much information of 25, 30 years of move experience that why can't we just put this in some sort of course that people can sign up for and just go through step by step on how best to do this for themselves. And even if it's a huge move, they could sign up and watch it go through the course and then say, now I really understand why I need an expert to help me on this.
Right. And I think the exciting part about pivoting your business to offering different resources virtually is we have a limited time frame when we're available to clients. But if you put your information out onto a digital course, it can go anywhere for 24/7. It can be international. And the framework of what we built is really going to show you whether you are moving your corporate offices or you're moving people within your current facility, how you manage that well. And I think a lot of people fumble their way through it. And the amount of time that's invested with an HR or a facility manager or corporate leader that gets thrown this random task of something they don't do regularly.
Right.
What is the value of their time? And you think, I can't afford to pay a professional, but how much downtime are you having because you threw someone into a task that they weren't an expert in? So they're Googling, they're trying to figure it out, they're trying to understand. We get a lot of those calls of, I just need advice or help. And so this is really where it launched. And the catalyst was COVID. Yeah. We were in the middle of a very large manufacturing and relocation planning right when COVID started. We were working at the San Diego airport, and we were ready to move a couple hundred people and a couple
Within
100,000 square feet of mechanical and electrical and paint, and we got shut down. The airport closed. Everybody went, inside, but yet we still had this job to do. We had to train all these people of what was coming. We had to pivot. We had to still do everything we needed to do virtually. And that really taught us that the world of being in person for meetings, especially when it comes to training corporate relocations, can be done digitally, can be done online. And so whether you're in person or learning, this is where technology is moving. Everyone has taken a digital course at some point. We've taken them for the flower business. We take them all the time for our current construction management business. We're looking at best practices, webinars, you name it. We're doing it.
OSHA courses, all of them.
Yeah. OSHA, CPR. We have done all at sexual harassment. You name it, it's a digital course.
Yeah.
And so why not? I think the interesting part about what we're doing is we're really crossing a line, though, that people are going to be like, whoa, you can't give all your trade secrets away. And I think at the end of the day, a company knows whether or not they need a professional expert or not. And so we're missing this market of 25 to 200 people because they can't afford a professional expert that's going to come in and train and teach. They're a smaller business, but they still have to do the work. So a course that's under $300 that's going to give you all the tools is going to be something that's valuable. Or a new facility manager that's now tasked with, how do I move people around my building? I don't know how to do this successfully when I need to. Do I just do it at night? Do I do it on the weekends? How do I tell them? How do I do this, right? There's not always a roadmap. And that's what we wanted to create, was the roadmap for them to success. And then once they got through it, like David said, you can evaluate, do I need more support, or do I feel confident that I can do this?
And for us, the outreach is huge. We've been involved in IFMA, International Facility Management Association, which is actually international but we've worked nationally and been involved with them for going on 15 years, going to the yearly conference, and this has always been a need. We're looking locally at who we can serve for move planning. But this digital course could help somebody in the middle of Arkansas or Nebraska or New York or wherever they're at, instead of being focused around San Diego County or in Southern California where we are. So the outreach is fantastic. And with this digital course and, with everybody in the world learning how to do things online, we could instruct someone and help someone through a move that is much larger than what we typically could doing it online. And so between the digital course and just the tools that we have these days, we can impact a lot more. And that was kind of the thought behind this. It's like, we do moves in Southern California, but what if we could impact people all around the world with the same tips and tricks? Mm-hmm. And as far as what you said, giving away our secrets and how we do things, I don't know how many times that we have heard this in, whether it be in the church or other associations where people are giving away the flowers, giving away what they have, and the payback on giving stuff out free compared to having to charge an exorbitant amount. The payback is just huge. And we love that. That's why we made this so affordable for anyone to be able to do this and use this, because we want to reach more people than we ever could locally.
Mm-hmm. And we wanted to put good content out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you can Google. It's going to lead you in a direction, but it might not be the right direction for your organization. So let's just talk a little bit about the framework of the course. It's 8 modules. It has a combination of videos and PDFs and sample takeaways for you to implement right away. And so again, this is really built for any organizational leader. You are going to come across a point in your career where you have to understand how to determine how to relocate people either within or out of your organization to a new facility. It's going to happen to you sometime if you have a career that spans 20, 25 years. You're going to be impacted by this. And there are steps you can take now to familiarize yourself with the process, so you're not overpaying for a mover or not understanding how to write a scope of work for something like this, or even to how to talk to your facility manager about what you actually are wanting to do with the right terms, because a facility manager might have a lot of the technology background of how to do the space planning or how to make a relocation happen. But if you as a leader don't know the framework of, am I asking for a restack or a relocation, those things are all going to start to matter. And the first part, we talk about right sizing your organization, which is what we really are moving into in this phase of the world right now, because there's this negative connotation when you're reducing your square footage and it becomes, oh, well, we're having to lay off, or we're, I don't know the right term, but it just is more of, help me here, like when you're minimizing your square footprint of your office, it has an effect on you. But if you say we're right sizing to where we are right now, this is what we need right now. We're doing hybrid. We don't need to have 50,000 square feet. We can do this in 25,000 square feet because we're having a different model and we're adapting and we're evolving. And so right sizing your organization feels like the right term to move into this new season of life that we're in after the pandemic. And so we talk about what that means and whether or not it's the right time for you to consider a relocation to a different footprint, or should we think about what capacity do we have within our current footprint to grow if we need to add more staff?
Yeah, and going back and my background is facilities management, and through the 90s and 2000s, it was these big offices with this big chunky cherry wood furniture and these massive cubicles in between all the offices, and design has changed incredibly, not only because of sustainability but also efficiency. And having these massive desks and all this space that's underutilized has really changed, and the price per square foot has gone up, and all the things that point in the direction like, what can we do with less space? So the fact that we've gone through the pandemic and companies have realized that they can successfully have people working from home and not even be in the same city or state and have employees that they just don't need to provide square footage for has certainly changed the game. And so you put all these things together and you realize, maybe my company is expanding and we're hiring a ton more people, but hey, we can restack, our existing building, and it could require some tenant improvements of making offices smaller, having more collaborative open space. There's a lot of different variables on this, but these are all the things that as a business leader you should understand the terms and what is happening at this day and age that companies are going to be more efficient. And not only that, but employees want something different than what they had before. And not everybody, because, and we just learned this really well recently from Tim Elmore, is that the multiple generations working together work differently, and you cannot put a 20-year-old in an office and expect them to be happy. They want to be in a space where they have interaction with others, and you have a older generation person that might want that office. So there's a blend that has to be dealt with, and it's not all one way or the other. There has to be something in between. And the restack and what we're talking about really helps guide you through that.
Yeah, so we'll give you some key questions to ask your leadership team, or if you are the leader to really dive into on your own of what makes sense for us right now. Where's the fiscal responsibility? And even if you are just doing a restack within your current footprint, you're still going to use all these tools.
Yeah.
You're still going to need to ask all these questions, and you're still going to need to think about the change management side. So right after the right sizing, we really get into change versus transition management. And we've talked about it a lot on the podcast of how we created the stoplight effect to really teach organizations about how the transition matters when you're dealing with employees, that it's not just the change of I'm relocating you either within the building or to a new building, but what does this mean to you? What's this transition going to feel like to you? How am I communicating clearly? How am I giving you opportunities to ask questions and participate so that this is mutually beneficial to us versus just telling you what's going to happen and you become a red on the stoplight, or as we work through all your questions and answers, you maybe are starting to be a yellow where you have questions, but you're starting to move into the process and accept that, okay, this is happening. Now I understand why. What's the value to me? What's the value to the organization? With the goal to eventually get you to green, to where we know that you're on board, you're ready for the change, and you might bounce between these, but that you have enough information to get back to a point where you're comfortable with what's happening. And so we spend a decent amount of time really talking about transition management. And if you're a leader in an organization and you're not focusing on transition management at all aspects of your organization, not just if you're doing a relocation, this is going to be a key tool for you. We already have the PDF on our website that you can click on at any time, but the deeper dive training into why it matters, how you implement it, you're going to use it all the time. And most of our corporate clients still use it today.
Yeah, and the biggest key on this module is the human factor. Mm-hmm. That it's not just butts and seats. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen it over and over again where, hey, it's just a move. We're just going to deliver the boxes on Thursday. We're going to make them pack on Friday, and when they come back on Monday, they'll be in their new space.
It's all going to work.
It's all going to work, and there'll be no issues. And that's such a wrong way at looking at it, and the way that it was done a long time ago, it's just not the way to successfully do it these days. Again, we're talking about humans. It's people, and you have to deal with the emotional part of it. And a lot of people don't want to get into the mushy emotional and feelings and all that. But if you do this right using our steps, you're going to get a huge buy-in from your staff, mm-hmm. because they know that you have their best interest in mind, and at the same time you're accomplishing what you need to accomplish as a business owner, as a facilities manager, as a director of HR, or anywhere in between. Getting them involved and following the protocol that we've put together is really going to help you through that process.
Yeah, a lot of people use the stoplight effect transition management model even for new initiatives. It's the same concept. You would not just launch a new initiative to your team without spending time going into it, why it matters, the value to the organization, and what we really teach you is the value of the why before the what. Yeah. Not what we're going to change, but why we're changing it. And so that really gets you on more of the leadership level. But yet it fits for anyone in the organization who is charged with determining whether it's time for us to relocate. The next one, we spend quite a bit of time on the next module, and it really is tips for corporate leaders. We have a section for if you're the HR manager. We have, because a lot of times relocations fall to HR. Yeah. I don't know why. It doesn't seem like that's the best spot, but it's like, oh, people change, it's HR's responsibility. And yet it's a combination of your procurement department, your HR department, and your core leadership team to do it all together.
Right, and our experience, again, is if the company's big enough to have a facilities team, the facilities team usually reports to an operations manager, an HR manager, or even an IT manager. That's mm-hmm. typically what we've seen. And so a lot of times it is an HR manager that is in charge of the facilities team, which is why this is important and why we did this module for HR.
Yeah. Then we'll dive into communication planning, and that's going to be for everyone. It's a module that's going to deep dive into how to clearly communicate the why of what you're doing, how to communicate where you are in the process, what it looks like 6 months out, 3 months out, 1 week out, week of. We're giving you that entire plan to break down to help you be successful. And then we're really going into what it looks like for the move checklist. And this is critical. Most people need a checklist. They need to understand what are all the steps that are going to be involved with what's happening to me. And we do it from a individual employee level to a department level, because there's a lot of things that the employee will do, but there are also things in common areas and spaces and break rooms and supply rooms that no one thinks about. It's like, who's in charge of that?
Yeah.
And so how do you work through those challenges? So we'll train you on all those steps to be successful. And then we move into David's favorite part, the project schedule, which most people don't work in project schedules, but there's a lot of different softwares that you can use now. For our purpose, we go through what a Microsoft project schedule looks like for a relocation in detail.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really important, and especially for the level of detail that we want to provide for a client. It really gets down to an hour by hour detail when it comes up to the final week into the move, the actual move itself, and then what it looks like after the move. But we do set, like Sarah mentioned before, a week ahead of time, 30 days ahead of time, 60 days ahead of time. And for us, when it comes to that, we are writing a scope of work. We are meeting with the movers, getting, having enough time to hire the correct mover, getting them contracted, getting them on board, doing the trainings with all the employees. So a detailed project schedule is really, really important, whether you use something like Microsoft Project, or you can use Excel if you really want to, and there are some other softwares, cheap softwares that you can use that will help you build a schedule. You can even use your calendar in your, whether you use Outlook or Google or whatever, you can use your calendar to build a schedule if you need to also.
I think it really depends on the size and scale of your relocation.
Yeah.
If you're moving hundreds of people, this is something you want to invest in. And if your team doesn't do it, you can outsource this piece to a corporation like ours, where, you just need some of the frameworks built for you. Because if you're doing a tenant improvement, if you have a construction side to your relocation, if you have a mover coming in, all of these people are going to ask for your project schedule. This is pretty common in the industry, that you're going to need to provide a clear schedule and outline of when things are happening. You're going to see on ours what it looks like when you're planning something as large as our airport relocation, which also had some 24/7 facilities that involved in it. What it looks like to start from a year out. When you're moving a really large organization like we were, you start a year out. So you'll get to see what that looks like in the very beginning, where in that year we are writing the scope of work, the request for proposal, when we start the original meeting with clients, how we move through the training from the core leadership team down to the department level, down to the employee level, and it's all outlined. And then you can see what it looks like for the 2 to 3 week window where we were doing relocations, how we phased those, how we brought staff back in. And so it really is a very detailed snapshot of what a relocation schedule looks like, which is going to add you so much value, because you'll have all the pieces and you can whittle down what makes sense for you versus try to figure out what should be on here. So the goal was to give you about a 5-page project schedule that you go, I need this, this, and this piece, and I can understand now where that should fit in my time frame if I'm running this large of a scale of a relocation.
Yeah, and again, you can go from simple to complex, and it really depends on how complex your move is. And you don't want to do a simple schedule especially if it's for instance, if it's a manufacturing facility that needs to stay up and running 24/7 or 5-6 days a week. There are ways to plan around that to move it in phases, and having a project schedule really helps for everyone to buy in that has to be involved in this, and what makes sense, and having the meetings and talking about the schedule of, hey, that's not going to work because we have a certain client that we're supposed to deliver at the same time frame. And so you can talk through that information, but if you don't have a schedule to talk around, it's really going to be hard to make sure that everyone is on the same page. This podcast is sponsored by CBSI. For the last 35 years, CBSI has helped customers navigate change in their organizations, whether they need a team to manage their construction projects or are planning a relocation to right-size their office space. With transparent communication and culture-building strategies, CBSI leads the leaders of organizations through complex projects. If you are in the need of a proven team, check them out at cbsisandiego.com.
I think this is the module where you start to go, we can do this ourselves or we can't do this ourselves, because you're going to start to see the workload on the individual teams that you have assigned this to for 3, 6, 12 months out. And you're going to have to evaluate, can I free up my facility manager, my HR manager, or my leadership person to do this, all these things over the next 3, 6, 12 months? Or do I need to hire an outside firm that specializes in relocation management and planning? And this will be where you start to really have those hard conversations in your organization about the value of time for your employees versus the value of an expert. What someone trying to learn how to create a project schedule, it's going to take them a month to at least figure out how to get it set to where it could take a professional a day.
Right.
So how much is it going to cost you? Yep. The salary of that person for a month or a professional for 8 hours?
Right.
You know, there's value to time in your organization to move it forward versus just pulling someone off and saying, figure it out. It's going to cost you so much more. And I think this is where it's the game changer of, we can do this. We're familiar with this. But I also think it's the game changer for you as a leader, an HR person, an FM, to say, let me understand this. So when I'm going to hire a professional firm, I'm familiar with the framework and the time frames of where we're at. So then you have a language when you're talking to a mover or a move management team to say, okay, here's where we are in this in our view of the project schedule. We're 6 months out. Here's all the steps I understand we need to take, you know. Let's talk about a price for this, right? It's going to add so much value to you to spend a little bit of time and money now to learn how to talk to those experts. And you're going to also start to understand the price points.
Absolutely.
All right. So the project schedule, then really we go into the deep dive. This is where the value of the course is really going to pay for itself, because when you're writing a request for proposal to get your mover and to do a scope of work, you can Google, but you are not going to get the price right the first time if you don't understand all the elements of a successful scope of work. You're going to bid it out. You're going to get a price. You're going to pick the low bid most of the time. And then that low bid is going to come back and say, well, you left all these 8 things off of your scope of work, so here's my change order, right?
And let's just pause right here. The biggest mistake you can do for a move is to invite 2 or 3 or 4, whatever movers out. Number one, you meet with them individually. They're all going to have different questions. You're going to give them different answers. The next day, it'll be a different company asking different questions. And so at the end of the day, you're going to get 4 different completely random proposals that overall have a scope of work that you want, but does not have the detail. It is our recommendation always to have a written scope of work, and that you walk with all your movers at the same time. So everything is out on the table and you get apples to apples comparisons. We just went through this literally in this last few weeks where we were asked to give a proposal for a project. We walked at a different time than the other individual companies did, and we provided our price, and we were not the low price. We don't have all the details on it, but I guarantee from my personal decades of experience that if you do not have a written scope of work for everyone to bid on exactly the same way and walk through at the same exact time, you will never, ever be able to compare those bids side by side and be getting the same scope of work. The interpretation of the scope of work from each individual company is going to be different. I guarantee that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And the change orders are going to come.
Yep.
You're going to pay for it because you didn't spend the time up front to invest in writing a real scope of work and doing the bid the best way to be successful, you're going to pay for it in the end. You are going to get change orders. It's going to cost you so much more once you start doing it piecemealed than if you had done it up front and everyone competed. You're going to get a better value when they compete against each other on the same clearly communicated scope versus, well, now I'm already in, so I can put whatever price I want because they need me to do this work.
And it might not even be that there's a change order. The bottom line is you might end up with excellent service. The final product you get is just not at the expectations that you had hoped for because it just was not clearly defined and you got what you paid for.
Yeah, so this one actually is going to add more value to you and your organization because most organizations are doing RFPs at one point or another. You are asking for a proposal, whether it's a service provider, a vendor. So this is a framework that transcends every element of your organization outside of just a relocation. So we are going to dive into key elements of an RFP. We're going to talk about public versus private works. We're going to talk about labor compliance. We are going to dive into where are you at in your leadership decisions about this project, who's on board, what's your budget, all the key elements that you have to ask before you even dive into a scope of work, because we have even seen lots of scope of works go out, whether it's construction, relocation, you name it, and someone doesn't realize that there's a different price point for this particular service, or you're a public agency and you forget to say prevailing wage, which is going to sometimes double the cost of your project.
And we are speaking in California. Mm-hmm. Some of the other states probably have other regulations, but in California for public works, there is something called prevailing wage that is a certain rate that you have to pay your individual employees if you're going to work on these projects. So I think every state's probably a little bit different. Some states might not have anything, but when we talk about prevailing wage, it's specifically for California.
Yeah, but there are typically in any state, if you're using state or federal funds, there's a different guideline of how you have to bid those projects.
Right, and it's important that you know what those are.
Yeah, if you're a school district, you have to, are you getting 3 bids on anything over $1,000 to $5,000? There's all these ranges. So no matter who you are, if you're a public versus private, there are different questions you're going to ask. And so we're going to give you that framework. And then we're really going to dive into a really detailed scope of work. We continue to use that airport model so you can see the consistency from the project schedule down into that scope of work and what that looks like to really outline it very clearly of what are the elements that I need to make sure are in there for them to bid on the first time, from the furniture to the computers to the technology to the time frames and the scheduling. I mean, it's all in there, and all the requirements of how we want to see the bid response come back in. So we're going to give you, we're going to walk through the elements of the scope of work and give you the sample to start today. So that way you can go in to your team and say, I'm not relocating, but I need a new vendor and I have to write an RFP. So I'm going to go pay for this course so I get that understanding of what are the key elements I should be asking and what's the sample scope of work look like. So then I can take this scope of work to my procurement team and we can plop it into our typical agreement and start to get that out there.
Yeah.
Then we dive into more of a move-specific item, which is called a move matrix. And to some, this is like the meat of a relocation and how it can really fail you. If you don't know everything about what is moving and who is moving, you will fumble. This will set you back in time and price, because this matrix, we're going to give you our Excel, which is our proven system of what we're doing with all the tabs for every possible element that might be moving. People, furniture, equipment, vendors that movers won't move, hazardous materials, what it looks like if you have heavy equipment. So we're going to give you the framework, all of the columns ready to go. So that way you can start today to know how I fit a person in here and track them all the way across, how I put a piece of equipment in here and track it all the way across, how that turns into my labeling plans with my mover. Typically, you're going to give this move matrix to your mover who you're hiring so that they know exactly who, what, and where is moving.
Yeah, and I'd say in simple terms, if you don't have this detail with a labeling plan, you're going to have a team of movers show up. Movers know labels. They know colors and they know numbers. They know what to pick up. And, the funny thing we always say is no ticket, no ride, like you're at the carnival. But if you don't have a detailed move matrix and know what every piece that's going to move and it doesn't have a label on it, the movers show up and they start grabbing things with labels. And if you didn't go through your common spaces, you didn't go through your warehouse, you didn't go through your server room or whatever the case may be, the mover's not going to grab it. And if they do grab it, when you get to the destination, they don't know where to put it. Mm-hmm. So you're going to end up with piles of stuff, a lost and found. And this goes down to even the boxes. If the boxes aren't labeled, they're not going to know where to put them. Mm-hmm. Granted, you can go through and figure that out, but you just wasted so much time and so much confusion and efficiency with your actual mover on move day. If you have dialed this in, your moves are going to go really smooth and things are going to end up where they're supposed to end up. Are there going to be tweaking and adjusting? Absolutely. But if you don't get this right in the beginning and you don't put the time and effort in the beginning, it's going to be a nightmare in the end. And not only if you're in charge of the move and you have to be there at the move over the weekend or over the night, whatever it ends up being, your staff that come back to go to work that can't find their mouse or their monitor or their favorite coffee mug, it's all bad. Mm-hmm. So planning this well up front, very detailed, is going to make that more efficient with, again, the end in mind of the end user that can come back to work to a new building or a restacked building and be able to get right back to work, which helps the company earn revenue because they're able to do their job efficiently. And this is why all of these pieces together matter.
Mm-hmm. The Move Matrix is your guide. Yeah. If you don't have this, then you, again, will be really in a hard stop when there's a question about where an item goes. You won't know where it goes. And so this template allows you to have someone start this process really early on of how many employees do I have? Let's list them by name. Where's their current location? Where do we envision them going? What do they have? Do they have existing furniture that's moving? Are they getting new furniture? How many monitors do they have? How many monitor arms do I need to buy if I want to add a second monitor? And who has what right now? Yep. It gives you that inventory for your equipment. It gives you the personnel list, and you can populate it however best fits what you're actually doing. And then this turns into your scope of work. So we're teaching it down to you from the high level down to the very detail. This is the deep details that you're going to need to tell your mover in the scope of work. Here's how many people, here's my equipment list, here's all those things, and it comes from this spreadsheet. So again, it's giving you the framework that we've spent 20 years perfecting, and you're going to have more than you need, but that's the intention, is that you only fill out the tabs that make sense for you and your organization right now. And even if you decide that you're going to need to hire a professional move planning service, you now have the framework ready to go, because your organization is going to fill out this move matrix anyway. You're going to be asked for all this information at some time or another, or you're going to pay someone a pretty high hourly rate to go in and inventory your space. When you can do that, right, where you put everybody also is part of what you're going to be responsible for. So you're going to tell the mover where they're going. The mover's not going to tell you. So that space planning part is also part of alignment with the move matrix.
Yeah, and I would also say that also sets you up for the future when it comes to which is the next step, which is the furniture liquidation. If you're moving out of a facility and you're getting all new furniture, most likely if you have a leased facility, you got to empty it out. You can't turn it back over to the building owner and say, okay, we're just going to leave all our furniture here. You might get lucky. There might be another company that's interested in it, but chances are you're going to be responsible for getting rid of that. And creating that move matrix up front gives you an idea of how much extra furniture you're going to have.
Yeah, you're going to have a column in there of whether this is going to be surplus or not, and that's going to start to trigger your leadership team to look at the requirements for your organization of how you surplus, because you're not just going to, go throw it in the landfill, especially if you're in California. Nothing's going in the landfill, which is great. But in this furniture liquidation section, we really dive into what do I do with all this old furniture? And we're going to give you some really practical tips of what we did to offload the furniture for free to the client off to educational institutions and nonprofits at the cost to the educational institution and the nonprofit. So an amazing tool that we discovered years ago when relocating a bank, and really diving into how does it make sense to let someone reuse all of this usable furniture, but that's not what the bank is looking for anymore. But yet it might be what a nonprofit or a school thinks is a treasure. And so we're going to talk about how you go about doing that. Again, no cost to you if you do it right.
Yeah, and the other piece with this is when it comes to moving to a new facility, a lot of times that's based on when your lease is up. And building your schedule so you have enough time to move out of your existing facility and empty it out before the lease is up is critical. We dealt with a decommissioning and move out of a building that was on a 48-year lease, and if they were not out by midnight of a certain day, that lease automatically renewed. And it was almost, we actually finished 2 hours ahead of time or the lease renewal. But having that deadline and working back from that really gives you a framework of what you need to accomplish. And that's why the schedule is so important. The move matrix is so important. A liquidation list is so important. And having the right tools to be able to do this right. And again, that just comes with experience. It comes with experience on projects that we've been asked to do. And maybe that time we didn't get it right and we learned from it. Fortunately, on that one we did, and it all worked out well. But these are all critical things you have to think about. And again, as you're going through this digital course, will be triggers to say, you know what, I can handle a lot of this myself, but I might need to reach out to a professional to help me through this portion, whether it be just as a consultant service for a few hours to ask questions on how best to do this, or come in and do this for me because I am completely overwhelmed. And by the way, I have a regular job that is taking up, 90% of my time, and the last 10% is not enough to do this well.
Right. If I'm over here trying to learn how to do this, is that what I was hired for? Yeah. I think the big takeaway, these 8 modules give you a really good framework, and maybe you have done a relocation before and you're like, I know what I'm doing. Remember that continual education is always going to enhance your ability to lead other people. And so some of these tools and tips and questions that we're guiding you through may enhance what you learned before. And things have evolved, and the way you treat people has changed. If you did a relocation 10 years ago, I guarantee you're going to have a very different experience now, because people come with a lot of different expectations of how they want to be treated in the organization. 10 years ago, you could have treated them like people in boxes, and that's what they were used to. And now with employee rights, they are not going to just roll over and say, you can just tell me I'm moving with no information and that I'm being downgraded from an office to a cubicle when I show up, because they're going to leave your organization. And how much time and money did you invest in this individual to do something like this poorly and have them leave your organization? And there's studies out there that show when you do a transition wrong, you could lose up to 40% of your staff. And so what would that cost you? So this is going to give you, for a few $100s, the framework to start to have these conversations with your team. And if you're not moving, your lease is up in a year, 2 years, this is the time. This is when you have these conversations, so that way you're on the same page when that 1 year out really comes around, because we have seen really large organizations start a year out and they're up to the wire of their lease agreement to get out because they thought they had time.
Right, they thought they had time, and one of the things that we'll talk about through this decision making. You have to be efficient on your decision making, and if you're dealing with a TI, and whether it's electrical equipment, switchgear, or even furniture, the lead times on these things are so much longer than they were pre-COVID, and it's still lingering on. And if you don't plan this up ahead of time, and because you don't have switchgear to turn the power on to your new facility, and it goes beyond your existing lease expiration date, again, these are the things that you need to look at so you're prepared for. You can have those conversations with the building owner saying, hey, this is what we're up against. Can we go month to month? These are all the things that we try to flush out when it comes to a move plan, so you are the most prepared you can possibly be. And is it always going to go smooth? No, it never will. But at least you have the tips and tools and know what questions to ask to be as prepared as you can to be able to pivot and make another decision. What's your plan B and plan C when these things do come up? So again, from the bottom of our heart as business owners and leaders, we want to see people succeed. We want to be able to give people the tools that they need to make good, rational decisions. And although we're not giving it away for free, it's almost free for the amount of information we are providing. Mm-hmm. Literally, this could be a several $1,000 course, I believe, from what we're giving. So for less than $300, it's a steal.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to launch our first digital course. This is the Corporate Relocation Masterclass. We have more coming next spring, more on small business development, how to launch a small business, how to be a manager and a leader in a small business. And then we also have, dreams of more of a leadership course in general, how to grow and impact your leadership to have the best influence on your employees, and just how to treat them better. Yeah. I think there's so many things we talk about here on the podcast and servant leadership and overall from our experience over the last 20 years in leading very large teams to really small teams. The framework is the same of how you treat your employees to get the best response back out of them, because it's only going to help you and your organization. So go ahead, click into the show notes, go check out our online learning academy. You can see the framework. There's some free resources in there and a free first video if you're interested. And we hope that this adds value to you.
We appreciate that you decided to hang out and spend some time with us discussing life and leadership. It would mean the world to us if you would share this episode on social media to increase our online presence. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a minute to rate it and review it wherever you listen. Mahalo!